Howdy heck and hey my dudes, how are y'all doing? Good? Good. I'm great. Let's get on with the video. Now, I know I've been gone for quite a while, almost half a year at this point, and there are a couple of reasons why that happened, but the main reason was that I just couldn't keep thinking of video ideas to post. That, and when I did have an idea, it was a bit of a chore for me to script it because I don't particularly like scripting my own videos. I enjoy writing scripts for my animations and comics and stuff like that, but when it comes to my own opinions, I like to just let them flow naturally, which becomes a bit of an issue if you're like me and you tend to talk without thinking, or you tend to not really understand how your words can be misinterpreted by other people due to poor wording on your part. I really struggle with putting my thoughts into words properly, and that's often led to misunderstandings and arguments. So I figured if I wanted to do more serious topics, which I did at the time, it just wasn't a good idea for me considering that I struggle putting words out properly, I guess is the correct term. But nevertheless, I am back and I am trying to make more content again, mainly because I'm physically unable to stream right now, which breaks my heart. I have all the Resi games that I need to play and I just can't right now. It's really uber frustrating. But I figured since I'm unable to stream right now and my passion project for almost 3 years, my webcomic Forget Me Not, is coming out on May 17th of 2021, I figured it would be a good idea to start making content related to the comic in terms of how I made it and the story and stuff like that. Now, you've all read the title, you'll know what's coming, you'll know what to expect, but I am going to put a disclaimer right here. I'm changing the names of everyone in the story and intentionally leaving out any of their personal information for the sake of their anonymity. Please don't go try to identify these people for the sake of harassing them or contacting them in any way, shape, or form. And if you already know the identity of these people, please don't reveal this information. Just let them be. Furthermore, in order to protect myself, I do have to say that while I will be explaining how these real-life people influenced the characters in the story of my webcomic, these characters are not representations of these real-life people, and under no circumstances are they legally considered libel or any other form of defamation. These are fictional characters with their own separate identities and personalities. They are not representations of one sole real-life individual. And with that, we can finally start. So in order to properly explain the creation of Forget Me Not, we actually have to go way back to 2016, about 2 years before Forget Me Not's original conception, just for some quick context. Back then, I was working on an entirely separate passion project, and I had a small group of people working with me on this project. And if you're one of those people, just real quick shout out, I'm sorry we don't really talk that much anymore. It's not because of anything you guys have done, I just struggled to maintain healthy relationships with any more than 5 people at a time. It's just a bad thing for me. Anyway, very quickly these people became less of just people that I worked with and more of dear friends of mine who I actually tried to help and care for when they needed me. One of these people, for the sake of the video, we're going to call Kaz. Between 2016 and early 2018, Kaz essentially taught me the meaning of the term best friend. I'd never really had a relationship quite like ours before, and he very quickly became a rock for me to lean on, both business-wise and emotionally speaking. I guess you could say at the time I was quite dependent. Now, at the start of 2018, my anxiety began to reach all-time highs. I couldn't sleep, I couldn't eat, I was throwing up at least once a week, and there were several other symptoms which I don't really feel comfortable talking about. Now, remember how earlier in the video I said I tend to speak without thinking and I'll occasionally fail to see how my words can be misinterpreted into something far worse than what I actually meant? Well, that actually comes into play here, and with my anxiety and how I was feeling at the time, the lack of self-awareness was tenfold. Now, to avoid personal information that isn't really relevant to the video, I had concerns about something related to Kaz for quite some time, but I had never really approached him about it. However, one night, while I was mid-panic attack, I, for some reason, decided that it was an appropriate time to raise my concerns. My wording about said concern came off much harsher than I was intending it to, and this led to a misunderstanding which then turned into a full-blown argument. And I would like to say this now, just so that it's clear, I'm not blaming Kaz for the argument we had. I was fully aware that I struggled with my wording at the time, and I should have taken more care into making sure what I said couldn't have been misconstrued. At the end of the day, even though I do struggle with these things, I am responsible for what I have said and what I will say, so just throwing that out there. Things continued to escalate, and suddenly the person who I'd relied on and trusted with everything became the one thing I feared most. I was being harshly subtweeted by him and his friends. He, along with people who had never met me before, decided that it would be appropriate to write a 2-page document on how horrible of a person I was, which, as far as I'm aware, was never released. And a friend of his slid into my DMs trying to get me to say negative things about him in order to continue fueling the hate. This went on for months. And I repeat, months. This event happened in, I think, March, and the harassment continued until about June. And in that entire almost 3-month period, I couldn't understand why things went down the way they did. So I tried to make myself understand. Cue the creations of Caden and Haley, 2 of the 3 characters in Forget Me Not. At the time, I really wanted to understand Kaz's feelings and be able to discuss things calmly, but he had made it clear that that was no longer an option. So I made 2, at the time nameless, characters to represent us, so I could write what happened from his point of view in order to try and get in his head and understand his feelings. I was also in a really dark place at the time, to a point where I would sometimes talk about cutting my own story short, so to speak, and I was fixated on the fantasy of just being able to simply forget Kaz. So I gave Haley, the character that was originally representing me, memory loss and tried to tie that into her lack of understanding on the situation. After about 20 pages of script and the borderline harassment completely dying, and the creation of my animation Lucid Dreams, I decided that the characters had served their purpose and I dropped the story. But not the characters themselves. I'm not entirely sure why, but something about Caden and Haley's dynamic kept me drawn in. And for a couple more months, I would experiment with different ideas for them. One idea was Caden being a demigod, another was Caden and Haley being representations of life and death, but nothing really seemed to stick, and I was giving up hope on these characters. Until I discovered Telltale's The Walking Dead series. I didn't think I'd enjoy it. I just needed something to drown out my Russian lecturer who was teaching things I already knew, and it just so happened to be in my recommended. But this game changed my life. I was hopelessly in love with the world and the drama and the character-driven story, and I had an idea. It was at that point I realized that what was keeping me attached to these characters was the addition of the memory loss in the story, and the question of, if someone forgets their past and moves on to be a completely different person, can they still be held accountable for their past? Combine that with my new zombie addiction, and boy howdy did I have a story! Around the time I began reworking the original script, I met someone who we're going to call Spade in this video. My relationship with Spade was not very long-lived, and again, without going into any personal and needless information, I, along with everyone else, began to see that Spade wasn't that good of a person, or at least he was in a mental state where he couldn't see, and didn't want to see, how he was negatively impacting others. Kaz made me scared of confrontation, Spade made me scared of my own safety at certain points. And that fear was something I wanted to expand on, along with the not acknowledging your own faults thing. And thus, both of those things were incorporated into Caden's character. But I didn't only take negative traits from Spade. His outgoing and initially friendly nature, along with his original mellow vibes that he used to give everyone, were also incorporated into Haley. And very quickly, these 2 characters were becoming less representations of 2 real-life people and more of their own person. I realized that there were many traits, both positive and negative, about me and the friends around me that I wanted to incorporate and expand upon. Only seeing things from your perspective, believing in a false reality even when confronted and proven wrong, antagonizing and vilifying people who may not actually be bad people, trauma of the past coming back to haunt you, being unable to accept that you're flawed. These are all things that I saw in me and around me that I took inspiration from and incorporated into the characters of Forget Me Not. And very, very quickly, Forget Me Not became something much, much deeper than originally intended. I can almost guarantee that everyone who reads the comic will see at least some element of themselves within Caden. Whether or not they recognize and acknowledge those traits is entirely up to them. Caden is not a character, not anymore at least. Caden is a concept, a cautionary tale if you will, and I'm extremely excited to see how people will react as his story unfolds. The concept of Forget Me Not is something very near and dear to me, so it's kind of amazing to see production wrapping up and having the pages waiting to be released. I'd like to give a quick shout out to DeviantArt user Lupin Lonely Wolf, who is, at the time of this recording, my official co-writer and editor for the comics. He helps flesh out my ideas and actually writes his own stories. I think my favorite at the time would have to be Skybreaker. He captures the magic of feeling attracted to someone perfectly, and the characters mesh together really well. Go follow him so he writes more. And with that, that was just a brief history of how Forget Me Not came to be. I really wanted to share this story for a while, but I've been really self-conscious about it, I guess, because I didn't want bringing up this story to kind of bring up old wounds with other people. I've moved on from everything that happened while this comic was being created. I'm sure the people that were involved have also moved on. So again, please don't try and figure out who these people are. Don't bring them into this. Just leave them be. I'm sure they don't want any of this brought back up, and I don't want any of it brought back up either. It's just that I can't not acknowledge how my interactions with them have impacted Forget Me Not. And at the end of the day, it's just as much of my story to tell as it is theirs. I do plan on making more Forget Me Not content, specifically about the actual production process and how I went through making the pages and writing the script and stuff like that. So if that's something you're interested in, make sure you hit subscribe. I'm not going to be making videos too often. I think I'm going to only try for once a month because I'm going to get very busy very quickly. But I really hope you guys enjoyed the video. If you did, let me know. Let me know what you're curious about comic production, because I've had a few people ask me a couple of questions and I have a general idea of what I want to do, but I want to know what you guys specifically want to know and just stuff like that. Alright, with that being said, I'm going to wrap up here. So thank you so much for listening. Stay warm, stay cozy, stay toasty. If you sneeze during the video at all, bless you, and I'll see you in the next one. Bye guys.